and welcome to the PCFX Fan Club podcast. It's been a little while since our last episode, but today we wanted to do another game-focused episode. So I'm here today with my co-host, Benjamin Yoder.
Hello, it's me. It's Ben.
And I am your host, Playongo / Matt. So this time we played some Chip Chon Kick. I think this is one of the more, I would say it's one of the more well-known games on the PCFX in Western, fan spheres. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always put it in the Holy Trinity, right? There's a Zenki, Chip Chan Kick, and Zero Igar, right? In some ways, though, I think it is it's in some ways like the easiest game to talk about, but then also the hardest game to talk about because mechanically, it's pretty straightforward. But then also, there's some other stuff going on with it. I think we'll talk a little bit about. But
Definitely. So, okay, well, I also wanted to maybe just talk about a little bit of PCFX news. I don't want to get, really sidetracked with that, but it's been a while since we've mentioned anything news related. I think there's been some cool things going on. So
yeah, and I have been very checked out at the moment from PCFX, so this is all news to me. So I'm excited to learn what's going on. So
okay, well, so I guess personally for me, not a whole lot has been going on aside from playing games, for this episode of the podcast. But in doing that, my PCFX is giving a CD read error, which is not something that it had done in the past. I have had it fail on FMV playback before, but I've never actually had it come up and say CD read error in a system font or something like that, which it just did when I was playing Chip Chon Kick. Is that something you've experienced? I know you were having some trouble with your system.
Yeah, my PCFX is finicky. Some days it wants to work. Some days it does not want to work. It seems like every time I would try to bring it on stream, it would immediately start breaking. Very cool. Thank you, PCFX. But yeah, it's interesting because I know you said that was system text kind of thing, but I have only seen that particular screen with Chip Chan Kick specifically.
Oh, specifically. Okay. Maybe it's an error handling on Chip Chan Kick itself.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't say that definitively, but that is what my memory is. That is what pops up. So, but I will say I use a burned disc of Chip Chan Kick. I don't know the price of Chip Chan Kick these days. I'm not buying a copy of Chip Chan Kick though. So
for the record, I used the original copy. I didn't I have it. So, so same behavior in both. It seems like.
Yeah. So I haven't played it on emulator or anything like that to see how it does there, but I'm gonna guess it probably runs perfectly from a user perspective, perfectly fine. I know from the back end, maybe not as fine depending on the accuracy, but yeah, it's our PCFXs just keep getting older day by day. So
yep, it was the 30th anniversary that we had, where we kind of had our Team Innocent translation patch drop and stuff. It's been quite a while. So.
It's been a bit since then, yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like those lasers. You could correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like those lasers have been out there where you can buy and replace them. But I don't know if those are old new stock or if there's some company somewhere still manufacturing the same model of laser or something. But
yeah, that's actually been a discussion on the Discord server recently because other people are having trouble, and I think I feel bad because I forget who it was, but someone's been buying PCFXs and trying to get them working, and unfortunately, I think they're on their third PCFX that they're having significant read errors with. But yeah, it's I think the laser situation, unfortunately, again, don't quote me on this, but it must have been old new stock for that, or even reclaimed from systems or something like that, because I don't think anybody's manufacturing anything like that. If they were, I think we'd be having a much easier time. We could at least source something and replace our lasers with them. I think that there is a possibility maybe of repairing that component, but again, I think it would require deep research with oscilloscopes and stuff like that. That some people in our group or maybe elsewhere might be able or willing to do, but it's nothing that's happened. So
Yeah.
on the positive side, though, I did want to mention that we've kind of been waiting for an optical disc emulator solution for the PCFX here for quite a while, and there've been some false alarms. Kind of, I know somebody was working on it a year or two ago, and even put some up for pre-order, which was really exciting. A bunch of us pre-ordered, and then things happened, and that ended up not coming to fruition. They were really good about refunding people, so that was no big deal. But recently, Regis has been. I think they just worked on something for the PC Engine, so they were able to take some of that knowledge and apply it to the PCFX, and have been getting some games working from an optical disc emulator that they're messing around with. So we've had some updates on Twitter specifically, and people have been talking about that on the Discord a little bit. So that's been really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of these like PlayStation and Saturn, all this stuff. Like the laser, I think is the most finicky component most of the time. I'm sure there are exceptions. Like I know with like an original Xbox is like all the capacitors inside are exploding. That's the problem.
Right.
But in most cases, it seems like the CD laser is the first thing to go in a lot of cases. So it makes sense. I haven't really tried any of those kind of optical disk drive emulators yet. I have ran things off like SD cards or something like that, or with the PS2, I have like a network cable that I run games through. But it is one of those things that like I through my whole life has been like kind of an original hardware guy. And it feels like lasers make the hardest, like those are the biggest challenges that you have with running a game now. And part of the original hardware, I think, is like it's nice to have a game run as accurately as possible. But lasers make it so that's not as easy. That's why, I had when we were playing Pachio-kun last time, I had to go on emulator, right? Because I was just like,
Yeah.
the game would literally freeze after running the same like 15-second song loop over and over and over again. It would eventually just like crash at some point. So
Yeah, I've
it's
always
hopefully
felt
one of
like
those things.
after the nuclear apocalypse or something, we're all going to be playing the Sega Genesis and the Nintendo 64 and stuff like that, because those cartridges, those are tough. Like they'll hold up to a lot of abuse. And those systems, I mean, they have their struggles.
Yeah.
Capacitors are definitely a failure point, but they're a lot easier to maintain.
Nice thing about PCFX in that would be because there's so few games, you can just kind of throw everything on one SD card and you'll be done with it for the most part. Unless it's like a new homebrew or a new fan translation,
That's true.
you're done once you put it on there. So
Yep. 62 disk images, and add in the maybe the demo discs from PC Engine Fan Magazine. You're good.
Get some anime freaks in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be curious because I don't know a ton about it. I guess with optical disc emulators, like I don't know if like read speed becomes an issue kind of thing.
I think it does. There
Okay.
was some talk in the Discord also, like about making sure to kind of like emulate things about the read speed from the real system into the ODE, because like if you read things too fast, there might be issues and stuff like that. I'm not sure like specifically, but it sounded like maybe around Queen of Queens. I think Paul might have been mentioning that.
Okay. So finicky PCFX as always.
Yes, yeah, it's never easy. I mean, you figure like, how hard is it to emulate? I don't know, just the thing that reads the disc, right? But there's a lot of like technical idiosyncrasies of it that just exist in the original hardware that like it's not always obvious.
Yeah, I mean, even burning CDs, like it seems like the video playback is the thing that has the biggest trouble, and I have to imagine part of that is just like errors building up and not being able to read it at the same. I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe the read speed matters or not in that case, but I imagine like a bunch of errors start building up after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's streaming information from the disk, so that stands to reason. But
well, cool.
So yeah,
That's exciting.
It is exciting. We'll see, how that plays out. I'm really curious to see if there's like a, some sort of commercial product, or if there's some open source, plans or anything like that, or if maybe if it just because it doesn't go anywhere. We'll see.
I
But
mean,
I'm really
like with
curious.
the last one, I'm sure the best of intentions are there, and so
Yeah.
like it's cool if it gets work done. And then also, if it's open source or something, I'd imagine that gives other people information so they can kind of figure out what they want to do with it, right? So
Hi, Future Matt here. So, I wanted to mention another piece of exciting news that I think recency bias just wiped from my memory when we were doing our recording, which is progress on a Mr. Core for PCFX. This was shared in the Discord by David not so long ago, and it's very exciting. So, we have some progress on Mr., some progress on an ODE, hopefully, we see more about at least one or both of those in the future.
there's the Queen of Queens fan translation, and I
Yeah,
believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it did hit 1.0.
I feel like he's done some videos, highlighting what's been happening. And yeah, like I said, I think we're up to like a 1.2 patch on that, and I think that there's probably more coming.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's definitely like something to look forward to on that, which I think is exciting.
Yeah. So props to Paul. Thanks again,
Yeah,
Paul, for doing all
well,
that
definitely.
work. So, and
Yeah,
if you want to check out Video Game Esoterica did make a video about it as well. So,
yeah,
so there's a video up there about it. I'm sure we'll play it as well at some point. But
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, but maybe knock on wood, we'll see this year. So yeah, do you want to talk about Chip John Kick?
we can talk about the hit video game Chip Chan Kick. It is yeah, it's one of those games that I think in some ways, for better or for worse, I think it is like one of the console defining games in the West, right? I don't know how much Chip Chan Kick matters in Japan, because I think the one of the things with Chip Chan Kick is that it is a video game. It is a let me not put it that way. It is an accessible video game for Americans, right? Because
I would
obviously,
say it's a more traditional video game
yeah,
than like the more narrative based adventure games that
yeah,
maybe were popular, and a lot of which came out,
yeah.
comprise a lot of the PCFX library.
Maybe the better way to put it is it feels like a game that could have been on the PC Engine, right?
Yes.
And I think that it would be a game that if people imported it on the PC Engine, they would be pretty happy with it overall. So I
Yeah.
think it kind of like follows that line. And so for an American perspective, I think Chip Chan Kick has like a pretty big presence just because you can pick up a controller, move a D-pad, press the button, and finish the game,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Uh,
going to be very familiar, I think, and accessible. So yeah, I think that you might find what I have to say about Chip John Kick a little bit surprising, because I feel like, especially in playing it again, I have a bit of a love hate relationship with it, more so than
mm,
I considered previously. Not to say that I really hate it. I would say I kind of love it, but there are things about it that I think have I think turned me off, like when I first played it in the 90s. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, why did I never beat that game back then? Because like you say, it's accessible, it's playable, it's familiar, all of those things. And it's tough because I think I remember, I think a lot of people are a little incredulous about the mindset in the 90s of like 3D being the new hotness, right?
mm,
Um, and that's ironic with the PCFX, because I wasn't looking for 3D from the PCFX, but in terms of 2D, I think I was much more interested in RPGs and strategy games and these narrative adventure games and things like that, because that stuff still felt a little bit fresh and new to me. Chip Chon Kick is a nostalgia like throwback game to single screen arcade platformers. And while I have a deep appreciation of those now, I would say, or maybe a deeper appreciation, at the time it felt old. Like
yeah.
I think it was supposed to feel old, right? It was supposed to be a throwback to the games that it resembles. And playing it a second time, it reminded me of a lot of games that I really do enjoy in the arcade, or on my like Atari 7800 and things like that. But that's the era that it's harkening back to. And I remember in the 90s, at least in the mid 90s, it was weird for me to be playing a game like that and to just like get into it, right? I've gotten into it since then, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I mean, this kind of comes back to what Takashi Meijing said of the Hudson marketing guy. What was his What was his name? Gosh dang it, the Master Higgins, that guy.
Yeah, there you go.
And him talking about like how video games are going to be more narrative focused. They're more about storytelling and stuff like that. And I think a lot of these kind of like 2D esque games, part of the reason that they get localized. I mean, Chip Chain Kick, lots of reasons why. But a lot of those kind of games, I think, just felt old in a lot of ways. They're like not forward looking. This is the era of like 3D graphics and blah 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 blah, right? And if you want to like make an argument for PCFX, it is the era of like these character based games, tons of text and stuff like that, right? And Chip Chan Kick, um, feels more like a PC Engine game. I mean, to come back to that, even down to just like how it does its cutscenes, it's not. There's an FMV opening,
Yeah,
but all of its cutscenes are, I guess you'd call it like sprite based. It's all like very sprite based art where they're just drawing frames on screen and stuff like that. So it's like in some ways, it's not even really using the PCFX's kind of like main features very well. Other than I guess voice acting, even that kind of feels stapled on. We'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but it just feels very simple in its implementation. But also it kind of makes sense because one thing that we were talking about beforehand was like the kind of before the podcast was like the kind of games this developer made before. So they're a PC 98 developer, right? Um, and they have like 4 or 5 games. One of them is like an erotic VN kind of thing. But then the other games they have are like block breakers and is Carrot like a matching game? I can't remember what that game is exactly.
yeah. It's actually in the title though. I think it's Block Breaker or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
But like all these games are very simple, single screen kind of things on PC, if I recall correctly, the non-narrative ones. Um, and so it makes sense that when you make a PCFX game, it'll probably be very similar. Although I think from what I've seen, Chip Chan Kick on PCFX is probably the most uh, animated game they've made in some ways.
I was reading some Japanese comments like
Mhm.
about their games, and it did seem like, I mean, this is just an anecdote from like one thing that I saw, but it did seem like they might have had a reputation on the PC 98 of making pretty good, like pretty enjoyable, act like arcadey puzzle games and such.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's arcade puzzle games, and then they kind of sprinkled in like strip elements to them, if I recall correctly. So,
Yes, yes,
but yeah, I mean, these kind of games are fun, like these kind of like simple puzzle games and things like that. So it it probably in the face of something like a Super Mario 64 feels like what the heck is going on over here, but I think like we said, looking back, it is something you can kind of appreciate better because I've never really had that arcade experience as like kind of a fundamental part of the games that I was playing. So Chip Chan Kick in a lot of ways does feel like in some ways the before time of the games I played. But that doesn't mean it's like not interesting and fun on its own. The way I've always heard it described is like it's like bubble bobble essentially. There's like an elevation element to it where you can like get platform up higher on the screen, and then as you get higher on the screen, that opens up like more opportunities for you to do to like different scoring and stuff like that, right?
yeah.
And so
That's a big element of Chip Chon Kick and yeah, the clear the screen sort of arcade games.
Yeah, so it's just like this very particular play style. And I think a lot of times you need kind of like a score mentality to get the most out of it. I don't know how you felt back then, but I think even today I still struggle. We're like, I just want to clear the screen. So like I will take the easiest route to clear the screen basically. But if you want to like actually get down and start doing score chasing and stuff like that, and like chip chain kick, you can beat it in like maybe 2-3 hours kind of thing, right? But if you really want to go for those scores, like you kind of need to get into the score chasing aspect of the game, and it's something that I think I personally have never been like super into in most cases.
Yep.
So I think that's
Yep.
like part of why I can appreciate the game. It maybe just didn't like resonate with me as much as maybe it does to like what a normal PC Engine fan might think,
Sure.
kind of thing.
Sure. It reminds me of like a game that I do enjoy doing that with is Cannon Spike on the Dreamcast.
Mm.
That's a Psycho kind of like shooter beat 'em up hybrid, and that game takes like a half hour to play through, right? But what's fun about it is you can play as like five, six, seven different characters. I think they're all Capcom based, like from different Capcom properties. I mean, I think there's one or two characters that are unique to the game, but the rest, it's like you can play as Mega Man or the little Red Riding Hood girl from Darkstalkers and stuff like that. And it's fun. But you know, part of that is like you said, chasing score, playing through again on harder difficulties, and you know that's something I really bumped up against playing Chip Chon Kick again. So my other, like, I guess, kind of knock that I wasn't really necessarily expecting is I started playing it again and I'm like, this game is hard, and it's not that hard. It's a bit forgiving, right?
Yeah.
You can set it. I think I think the easiest difficulty might give you unlimited continues. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure it does. And you can set how many lives you have basically per continue too. So I basically set it to max lives per continue, but it doesn't really matter, I guess, if you have unlimited continues. But if you want to up the difficulty, you know, you can put it up to normal. You can then you have limited continues. You can give yourself less, you know, fewer lives per continue, and things like that. So I think there's a lot of room to challenge yourself with the game. But dude, my middle-aged reflexes when I started this game were just not doing it, and I got into it. It took me a little while, and then I kind of clicked back to it, and I figured out how to play the game again, and I got through it and beat it. But I was almost a little worried for a minute there. It wasn't going
I,
so well.
yeah, cuz like when you continue in this game, there's like I think 6 worlds total. When you continue, just continue on the stage itself basically. So
Yeah,
like if you game over on stage 3, you can just replay stage 3 basically and you have
yeah.
your full continues again and things like that.
It's pretty generous in a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing you're losing is again your score. Once you continue, your score goes back to 0 basically as far as I remember. Um but yeah, so I don't know why. I had the game already set on hard. I did go into settings and it was already set to hard. I don't know if I was like trying to see if there's like a different ending or something like that at some point. Whenever I originally streamed the game, that's probably the last time I really sat down and played it. I think I played through it on hard. Um and yeah, it's weird because what makes it hard is I think like a combination of things. One is, like I said earlier, like you're kind of platforming up on this game, and these other characters can kind of jump up and down the platforms, and each of those are the enemies, and each of those enemies can either just kind of like walk into you, or they can like stun you with like shooting something at you, or maybe sometimes just shoot you with something you just die immediately. But your character doesn't have a lot of momentum. Um, Jumping is probably the fastest thing you can do in this game to get out of the way of something. But when you're
There are
walking
speed
around, it's
ups.
very slow. And yeah, there's speed up and buffs. And if you're good at not dying, you'll keep it for more than 10 seconds. I am not good at not dying, but it's
I'm not good at not keeping those speed ups either.
so it is one of those things where like I think you have to be very aware of like your own limit to your movement. And also play a lot more like conservatively. But so basically how you like actually kill enemies in the games, you have these like little, I don't know what you'd call them. I forget what they're called. The little balls you throw and they have
Yeah, they do
eyeballs
have a
on them.
name. They're like moves or something like that. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. You basically throw these things at enemies and it stuns them. And that doesn't kill them though. You have to go and specifically kick them in like almost like a original Super Mario Brothers kind of way of like, you know, you hit the turtle from below or the Koopa from below, flip it over, you can kick it kind of thing. It's a similar thing like that where you have to go and like specifically kick it. But when you kick it, the enemies kind of like fly down the screen and they'll like go down each layer and like land on different platforms and they'll kill enemies on the way down. And depending on if you like combo them together, you'll get more points. And then sometimes I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like sometimes power ups and stuff might be associated with that too. But
I
I'm not
think
100
so.
percent sure.
Yeah, maybe the higher that you get a score, in one combo, the more chances are you. I do feel like they throw you a little bit of a bone. It seemed like when you die and you come back, when the first enemies you kill seem to tend to give you like power ups if you. I don't know if that depends on if you had them when you died or not. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah.
it did feel like that.
Um, so it's like actually killing the enemies isn't that hard, other than some of them take like 5 hits to stun them down. Um, but the bigger thing is like, can you line up all the enemies in a way that will combo? So you're gonna go and like try to actually make it so you'll hit more than like 4 or 5 things at once. And I feel like that's really, really the difficulty this game comes in, is like trying to maximize score again. But if you're on top and you have like this stunned enemy, you're more or less safe. So it's more about, you know, trying to find the line at that point. But you have to platform all the way up to the top. You have to not die, and then you have to stun the thing at top, and then hope nothing else jumps up onto you and starts harassing you while you're trying to plan this thing out, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and
So
and it is really interesting too, like the way, because even the way that they created the levels, you can tell that there was some thought put into things like, so you can. It's easy to move up. It's difficult to move down. Mostly
yeah,
because you can jump through platforms going, jumping up, but there's no way for you to go through platforms going down. You have to walk off the edge of them.
yeah.
So, it's in some ways it does create these sort of corridors where you can move. Like maybe it's easy to move up, but it's harder to move down. Or there's only going to be certain areas where you can sort of move down through. Um, so it is interesting. I know that the one of the stages has a lot of boards that have like half height platforms. So if you're standing on them, you can't just like throw uh, your little Puyo blobs and like hit the enemies, because the enemies are like a half step lower than you are. So that like that's interesting. There are little things in the design that I think are kind of clever like that keep things at least a little interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with this game, I feel like it's doing a lot with a little in a lot of ways, as simple as it is. Even down to like some of the visuals of the game, like the backgrounds in this game are incredibly dense. I feel like there's a lot of sprite work going on. There's a lot of attention to detail in the back. So it's like, yes, you are on this platform, but there are so many ways that the platform is lined up that makes it just like awkward to deal with, whether it be just like a little like room they basically put you in where there's like little walls on each side with a hole down the middle. And then so, you're up there trying to like hit the guy that's like on the other side of the room, but he might drop down or shoot you from across the way. It's like as simple as it looks. I feel like there's a lot of thought put into like the layout of the rooms and like how those different pieces kind of interact with each other. And each stage kind of challenges you. I wish I had a better because like I don't play a lot of these kind of games. Um, I wish I had a better understanding of like exactly what was going on there. In terms of like, sometimes when you play a game, there's like a very similar design language between different challenges. And so you can kind of feel like, oh, this is the kind of thing they're trying to get me to do here, but it's applied in a different way. I don't know if I ever in playing Chip Chan Kick noticed any like consistency in that regard of like, this is this type of trap and this is like the different way they're trying to apply this kind of
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah, I don't know what the game would be. It reminds me of a lot of games like while I was playing it, things like Pac-Man,
mm,
things like Joust, if you ever played that. Things like, well, I mean, like Bubble Bobble, obviously, Rainbow Islands. I think it's another Bubble Bubble style game. But even the other games too, like even the original Mario Brothers. I'm not talking about Super Mario Brothers.
yeah.
There was an arcade game that was just to clear the screen. You were talking about it earlier, and I think people like anybody who maybe is experienced at like score chasing or speed running on those games, those kinds of games, might find similar elements in Chip Chun Kick.
I will say something like Mario Brothers at the very least, and Pac Man. Like
Yeah,
the level layout is pretty static.
yeah,
Um, I think Bubble Bobble does have different variety of layouts, though. I think each stage kind of has its own structure to it. I feel like Bubble Bobble's a lot more open. Um, and part of that might be because in the case of like Bubble Bobble, when you shoot a bubble, you can kind of ride it up the screen. So like having the open space for a
Mm,
player to like put a bubble and fly at the screen
yep,
makes it way more open. I feel like chip chain kick is very claustrophobic. There
it
is
is.
not a
Yes.
lot of space. Every layer is just kind of stacked on top of each other. And yeah, it's just hard to kind of read. I don't want to say it's hard to read, but it is. I feel like you're dealing with a lot more stuff in a lot smaller space, basically, and so it makes it challenging, even though there's just not a lot going on. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know how you felt like fighting the bosses. I mean, there's a couple things I think that put pressure on you in the game. One is a time limit
yeah,
per each board. So if you take too long, an enemy appears and starts shooting at you and flying around the screen, which definitely makes things difficult if you get to that point. And especially like the boss battles, there are usually two stages. The first stage of the battle is that it's just a normal board, and you have an additional enemy that takes more hits to kill, basically. And
yeah.
once
You
you
actually, in those cases with the bosses, you don't stun them. You actually
right,
just straight up hit them to do damage. You can kick things into them, but
yeah, yep. But once you've done enough damage to them, then they basically, I feel like they usually call out like a mecha or something and get into it, and then start attacking you with that, and that's a
I
whole
didn't
other
think
thing.
about that. That it is a mecha that they're probably in,
Yeah,
but they are all, as far as I remember, they are all robot designs. So
I
that
think so.
actually makes a
Yes.
lot of sense. Yeah, because
Yep.
they just turn into like a little energy thing and then like go inside of it, right? I think is how it
Yeah.
worked. But
Yep. Yeah.
so
They
I
don't
didn't make that
physically climb
connection.
into it, but yeah. And you can depending, you can still have enemies on the board at that point, because like they will keep calling reinforcements in basically until you take their health down, and they change form. Once they change form, they don't tend to call in new enemies unless that's like part of their attack. But
Hmm.
you could have a board full of enemies and the boss in their second form, and that's pretty chaotic. I don't know. How did you feel about the boss battles?
uh, it's chaotic, and but it's also like beneficial because if you can kick things into it, I could be wrong. I mean, there's no like
That's
damage
true.
numbers or anything like that, but it does feel like kicking things into the boss is like more effective. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I
Maybe it's
believe it
just
does more damage.
placebo
We
effect.
did. I did photograph the manual and like machine translate it, so
Yeah.
there is. I mean, we'll probably post that to the Discord or something like that, so people can see it, at least for what it's worth.
Yeah.
There was some information in there. Not a lot of new information. I think it's pretty straightforward, but
I think the only thing I learned from there is that like you could get out of stuns by moving the D-pad back and forth faster, right?
yeah, I didn't realize that. So, because yeah, so it seems like some of the enemy projectiles will stun you. Some of them might just kill you. So when you do get stunned, wiggle that D-pad back and forth. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's. I mean, it makes sense. Like you can do that in other games, but I just never. It never occurred to me.
I think it's one of those things that like weirdly enough, this is like again, this might be me like playing games kind of after the fact of a system like this, but like I think of that a lot with analog sticks, particularly. There's
Yep.
something about moving an analog stick around that tells me like break out, break out, break out. With the D-pad, I don't think the motion feels the same, which this is a weird thing.
Mm.
But it like has this weird like like the wiggle aspect doesn't feel like it should work for some reason. It does. I mean, obviously, it just depends on the game and how it's programmed, but something about it feels less natural for some reason
Yeah,
for me
it's a more
versus an analog
difficult
stick.
motion, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't think about that at all. And so yeah, there's like times where you are getting stunned like nonstop over and over and over again from the same enemy. You're like, please, please free me from this hell. But most of the time I would just end up getting hit by an enemy. So um but yeah, being able to wiggle out I think would have been good. I didn't realize that until after I had already played it again. But so I don't know. Did you test it? Like how much faster is it?
I didn't test it. No, no. I feel like that's going to be something for future playthroughs, but yeah, no, I didn't try it out. I did do your trick of plugging a second controller in for the boss battle, and that way I just worried less. I mean, my other character would still die, but it mostly goes after like the active character, so I was able to like switch back and forth between them just to give myself a little extra like staying stamina for finishing the boss. That made things a little easier.
Yeah, it's basically the like continues. I had to kind of remember exactly what was happening because I had a vague recollection of doing this on stream where I basically plug a second controller in and was like, I will continue. And it's like, but when I was playing, I was like, what is the benefit of this again? I can't remember.
Right, right.
But I realized the reason why is because when you die on a boss fight and continue, you go back to the beginning of the boss fight because you reclear the
Oh, okay.
stage. So
So
the
that
whole
keeps you in the fight.
yeah, so the whole point of doing that and continuing off the other character is that you continue the fight going forward. So what you do is you wait until the other character has one life left, and then you continue basically.
Hmm.
Or you can even wait till they're dead. Technically, there's a little bit of a window that when somebody dies, you can press it and the other player comes in, kind of thing.
Sure, sure.
So that's kind of the point of it. When you're playing on hard, especially,
Yeah,
the bosses take a while. So I didn't say too much about the bosses yet, but like I can't the kind of I don't know how to describe them. I guess they're almost like shoot 'em up esque. Like maybe a difference between this and other single screen games I've played is like I feel like a lot of those games don't have bosses. I don't know if Bubble Ball has bosses. I don't know, but I feel like the boss fight of Bubble Bobble is just like a more complicated board, not so much like an actual boss.
yeah. I
Um,
think there's one other. Maybe it's Rainbow Island that has like kind of the same sort of boss style, but I don't think I'd never run into a clear the screen game that had bosses like this until I played Chip Chunk Kick.
yeah, yeah. But they're very like shoot 'em up esque, and a lot of them shooting like spread shots and stuff at you. So you have to kind of navigate. And again, because unless you're powered up, because you move so slow, it's like it's you're like trying to dodge between these like feathers being shot at you, and you're like the gap is like the same size as your character, and you're like, please, please, just like walk slowly backwards and get out of this. But you have to like throw this ball at them, unless you're kicking stuff at them again. Kicking stuff is the nice thing about kicking stuff is you can be a safe distance away from the enemy because when you kick somebody, they're just going to bounce all over the screen basically. But with the ball, if you're throwing the ball at the boss, it does damage, but you have to be right on them, and then that's when that spread shot's going to come in and start messing you up basically. Um, and a lot of bosses have similar things to that, but I don't know. It's kind of like I'm trying to remember. So there's like the bird at the start has like a spread shot where he shoots out a bunch of different feathers. He also like dashes across the screen back and forth.
Yep.
Um,
There's bubbles that the I think the fish enemy shoots. There's
and
one
then
that
he has like a cannonball that can either stun or kill you. I
okay.
never quite figured out which what I think if you get hit by the ball, you'll be stunned. If you
Okay,
get hit by the explosion, it will kill you. I think that's what it was. I don't know for sure.
interesting.
But that seemed to be what was happening. Don't quote me on that, but that's my guess. Um, but yeah, and then like there's like some monkeys who would like send out these like heat seeking things that would follow you. You have to kind of like move around the stage, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Some,
they're dogs. I don't remember
some of
exactly what it
them
was,
some of them
but
would spawn enemies. I think the crow. Maybe it wasn't the crow. Maybe it was the monkey. There was yeah. So it's like isn't it one of those like clapping monkeys? It's got like the
yeah, they're,
symbols.
they're a little like
Yeah, yeah.
I will be honest with you, I've never seen one of those things in real life. It's
Oh, okay.
always been in media. But yeah, the little
Yeah,
monkey with the what are those called?
symbols.
Cylinders, symbols. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Honestly, so visually, I think especially when you get to the boss battles, what this game reminds me of is a cute 'em up. It's
oh, like oh, what would be that be like? What's that game called? The Konami game with the classical music.
Parodius.
Parodius, yes,
Yeah,
Parodius.
it reminds me of Parodius. Yeah, that's the visual language of it. I think,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is fun. I think those games tend to. I feel like they kind of tend to become sought after and collectible. Like after the fact, a lot of times they come out and people are just like, yeah, okay, it's like a cute shoot 'em up game or something. But like later on, people kind of seek them out. I think because they're fun. They have a good
Yeah.
atmosphere to them.
It's like kind of like the ridiculousness of it to some degree. Like in the case of Parodius, I think so. I've never played Parodius. I've never played Gradius really either. I mean, I'm sure I played it at some point, but I played Raiden 2, I think. But
I love the writing games.
I don't. I was like, or maybe it was what are the PlayStation launch window one? You know, the big tall cardboard box one. Whatever Raiden
Yeah,
that is, that's the one I played. And I was a kid, so I had no idea what I was doing. He's like, "Cool spaceship blowing up stuff. Cool, all right." But I did play Soldier Blade on the PC Engine on Virtual Console, so that's like the most recent experience I've had outside of Zoroigar. But uh yeah, it's like the ridiculousness of like the legs and stuff, like the dancer leg showing up on screen and things like that, which Chip Chan Cake doesn't really have that, but I think it is it has personality, right? So like one of the things that we haven't talked too much about is like in these different stages, there is like an associated character with them. So one of them's like a pirate girl, one's like a shrine maiden, and you get a little cutscene where the two main characters, Chip and Chan. Is that Chip and Chan? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Chip and Chan. No, Chip and Chap. They'll have this little interaction, and because it's all voice acting, I can't like machine translate it, so I don't know what's going on in these scenes. But um they kind of like yell back and forth at each other for the most part. It's like a silly little interaction, and they have, you know, their typical anime visual humor kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're all like minions of the Demon Lord, and I think specifically they're taking over like boroughs of Tokyo, so
Mhm.
like districts of Tokyo.
Yeah, and I think like the where they're taking over also like connects with their character a bit, because I think it, like there's like a zoo, and one of the girls is like an animal girl with like paws
Yeah,
and things like that.
the
So
first level has like some actual buildings, like recognizable buildings from Tokyo. So yeah, I
yeah,
do
yeah.
think it fits in a little.
So the game just has like a sense of style. It's very cutesy and poppy in that way of just like, I don't know. It's very oh god. It kind of reminds me of like what's her name? Princess Sasami, the
Oh
Tenchi
yeah,
Muyo.
from Tenchi Muyo.
Yeah, I don't remember for sure. This may You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like she had her own series that was a lot more kind of like, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it felt like it leaned into that kind of like cutesy ridiculousness to some degree.
Yeah, pretty Sammy. I
Pretty
actually
Sammy,
love
that's what it
the Pretty
was.
Sammy TV series. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good.
So that's like vaguely what it reminds me of, is that kind of style. Because Parodius, I think, is very like ridiculous in the sense of like, you know, sexy leg, like it is almost absurdity. Maybe is the way I would just put it in the case
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Parodius, where I don't think Chip Chan Cake feels absurd. It just feels colorful, playful, and pops out. I
Wait.
think a lot of the designs of the bosses like kind of resonate with that. And so like you have we mentioned earlier, like you have the initial character that you can like is out, and you'll fight them, and they're pretty simple. They'll just like stab at you and something like that, like with a sword. Um but once you defeat them, I think that's like a kind of where the personality comes in, is those big robot bosses. And then so all those like different visual effects of what those bosses are doing is kind of like how all that stuff kind of fits together. But yeah, I think that's
Well,
where the boss fights are the game shows its most personality in some degree, I think. So
yeah, definitely. And while we're talking about the boss fights too, this is more the last level. But um, I know when we had David on, he'd been speaking with a programmer who did
mm.
subcontracting work essentially on this game, and they had done a bunch of what I think it was raster interrupt work on this, which basically was generating kind of special effects. It was mostly, I think you see, that stands out to me is in the last level, the background does a lot of like shimmying and, sort of like there's a lot of motion, like kind of sort of wave motions and things like that. Which interestingly, I mean, this game is visually a little busy, but I don't know if you experienced this at all. I think I did struggle to like identify exactly what was going on with the character and the shots and everything once in a while, but I think they did a pretty good job visually of like making things distinct enough that you don't really lose Chip or Chap in the confusion. I think I struggled with that just a tiny bit on
You mean like
one or
when you're
two
actively
boards, but
playing,
yeah,
basically?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think if it gets
It's
too
very
busy, like
dense backgrounds, I
yeah,
think. Chip
yeah.
and Chan, Chip and Chap, Chip and Chan, Chip and Chap. They Chip Chap. All right, trying
It's
to get
called
these
Chip
names
Chon
out.
Kick, so yeah,
Chip Chap Kick. I
it should
should
have.
know.
It should well, it's yeah, Chip Chon Kick. It should have been called Chip and Chap,
Yeah,
Chip and Chap's Kick or something
Chip
like
and
that.
Chat's kicky time. I
Yeah,
mean, all you're doing in this game is kicking things, I guess,
that's true.
technically. So that's how you beat the game, is they
I
kick
guess you
around things.
stun them first and then you kick them.
Stun them and then you kick them, but you murder them with your feet.
Yeah,
So, um, but yeah, I think it's the animals and stuff on screen that usually get kind of lost in the background. Like the enemies themselves kind of blend in a weird way.
yeah.
Like
Once in a while, yeah,
I think it's weird because like this game has a very like chibi esque art style. Like those characters we talked about earlier, like the boss characters in the cutscenes, they're kind of like they're not full grown anime girl aesthetic, but they're like kind of somewhere between super deformed and like a full person, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. So like kind of in between.
yeah,
Um, I don't know how to describe that exactly, but they're not chibi characters. But when you go into the actual game, all the sprite art is very chibi esque, and so like none of them have necks, right? They're all just kind of smashed together, basically. And so like I think most of the enemies in the game and stuff have that kind of chibi look, and that's kind of supposed to be what sets them out from the background. But I think everything's like super colorful, and so I think that's where like the color depth kind of gets lost on a lot of stuff, where it's like if there's like a very visually diverse background, like I can't necessarily see the little vending machine with feet walking around,
right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And not, not to dwell on it too, because I think they actually do a really good job of making everything pretty identifiable. But yeah, I think it was maybe an enemy or two here and there. I remember I definitely jumped into one enemy one time just because I just didn't see it.
yeah. And the background's always changing, so I think it's one of those things that like it's going to be more different on each individual stage, um, because literally every dungeon stage is is a like slideshow of a thing. Like you're progressing through this area. Like you mentioned earlier with like the Tokyo part, where it's like you're going through Tokyo and each of those buildings. We made like a Twitter post about this forever ago, where it was like, what are these individual buildings and where do they relate to in Tokyo, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And every stage doesn't maybe have that identifiable aspect as much as the first stage does, but every stage is like when you're at the zoo, each part of the zoo is coming through, and you're kind of like seeing this progression, even though it's a single screen
Yeah.
thing.
Yep. Yeah. It
It
actually
kind
the
of gives
background
that
actually
feeling of
kind of
momentum.
scrolls. You almost like fly to the next stage.
Yeah. I get. Do you? You don't get put in bubbles, but your character like gets lifted up and they just kind of like wiggle around as
Yeah.
this like
Yeah.
sound effects plays as you go to the next stage, kind of thing. Um, but it's one of those things that, like I was saying earlier, like there's just like a lot of attention to detail in this game, and I do think it kind of creates some of those visual consistency issues I was talking about earlier. But it's so like when you're playing the PCFX, I feel like a lot of it is like the appreciation for the detail of what's put into a scene, kind of thing. A lot of times, and so it's like I'm kind of okay with like sometimes I'll die to a vending machine. It's fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yep. No, that charming like 2D, you know, artwork. It's a bygone era in
Mhm.
in more ways than one. Something we've been skirting around a little bit as we've been doing this discussion is just the origins of the developer.
Yeah,
So they did most of their work on the PC-98, and we talked about some of the other games, which have actually starred Chip, the character. So I think that they've used that character before. I don't know in exactly what. I feel like maybe is it like Cyber Metal Orange? I think
I
Metal
believe
Orange
Cyber
was one
Metal
of their
Orange, which is the
yeah.
block breaking game.
Um,
Um, and then Magical Blocks Carrot is
yeah,
the other one.
yeah,
Oh, it is like a falling block game, is what that
yep.
one is.
Okay.
So
So I mean, one, I guess I would have loved to see them, port um, those games maybe to the PCFX two could have been pretty interesting, but those were adult oriented games that had some, adult content in them.
yeah.
And I think something that, it stands out a little bit, I think, when you encounter Chip John Kick right from the cover of the game is that it feels a little off. There is a little bit of a creep factor to it where you're like,
Yeah.
why are these characters like specifically the cover, something that I hadn't thought of until just when I was playing it again, is that the character's actually like bending over and almost like sort of showing off under her dress. But then there's like, I think she has a tail, and there might even be something else that's like getting in the way. And it's almost like
Mm,
this, oh, you know what? We develop games on the PC-98 that, that are kind of sexy adult games. And they're like, on this one. This is our console game. You can't see that stuff here. That almost feels like kind of what they're trying to communicate with the cover for the game. And I think that I think that hits, that probably resonates for, like, I don't know, anime and game otakus playing PC-98 stuff in the 90s, right? And then if they're familiar with the developer and kind of see that cover on the PCFX, and it's just like a little haha, like in joke kind of thing. But I think as just a layperson looking at the PCFX now, it's a little off putting. I think that that's something that needs to be kind of recognized about
Yeah,
this game.
it's a weird thing because like it's such a line where it's like, so if you play this game, so one of the first times I played this game, I played it with my dad. Like, hey dad, let's come play 2-player
Let's
PCFX games.
play.
A
Yeah.
father son bonding moment. And yes, that stuff started coming on, and
Did he say
this
anything
is
about
me.
it,
I'm
or
just like, I've seen so much of this kind of stuff. My brain's just kind of like, whatever. But I think that there was probably some uncomfortableness, for sure. And it's like, because I think it's one of those things where I've played a bunch of games. Like when you play Castlevania 64. So I guess maybe the thing to say is like, so you talked about the cover throughout the game. There's a lot of these scenes, like cutscenes, and most of the time Chip and Chap's underwear is visible. It is like pretty regular. It is not like, oh, once in a blue moon. It's like, oh, not like here's a funny joke with it. It is just, it is here and available
yep,
at most
it's
times.
like the panty shot visual language of
Yeah.
an anime like Agent Aika or something like that, right? It's maybe not that quite that egregious, but it's yeah,
I would have to go back and look, but I feel like it's pretty consistent that
yeah.
that is like visible. Um, but I've played other games, like even something like Castlevania 64. If you play in the alternate outfit for Carrie Fernandez, which is the main girl in that game, like the skirt like goes up and you see her panties when you jump. And so like the entire time playing the game, it's just like panty shot, panty shot, panty shot, panty shot of this thing. And then also, if you watch like old Doraemon episodes and stuff, there's like a lot of skirt flipping and stuff like that. Um, and so it's this stuff. Oh, Higurashi Daybreak, which is like a Gundam versus style Higurashi game. Same thing with his characters in there. It's like this stuff is just so around that at this point my brain just kind of turns it off. Um, but I think the reason it feels so weird here is that the constant presence of it and the constant focus on it. Um, And I think when you look at the developer's history where they're making like erotic PC-98 games, uh part of it, once you know, is also kind of the intention of it as well. Where, Chip and Chap have been in these games presented in a sexual fashion.
At least Chip.
And I'm pretty sure one of the games has Chap in it from what
Okay.
I saw. So but yeah, so like when you come in with that knowledge as somebody who does know about this, it's like, oh, now that I know about it, it is just like, oh, this is very like, it has like a skeevy factor to it. It's not like I feel like we've talked before about the idea that like with like Zoku Monogatari, is that what it's called, the
Yeah,
dating
yeah.
game, which is
So
not an 18 plus game to be
Hatsukoi.
clear.
So
Yeah.
first love story. Yeah.
um there's like a you can be like a kid with a crush on your teacher, and that's like kind of a presented as a romance arc as far as I can tell, even though it's not really a romance thing.
Yeah.
And like there's
I assume you're not consummating these romances. I assume that it's a story about like
the feeling of having that crush with a
those
adult,
first love
basically, as a
feelings
kid.
as you
And so
grow up.
like
Yeah, yeah.
if you look at it that way, where it's like feeling of this, then it's like, oh, the intention is that you're supposed to be recreating this feeling that you'd have as a kid, kind of thing, right? Versus I think if it was like actually more supposed to be sexually evocative, then that's where it's like, okay, this gets a little weird. I think Chip Chan Kick gets close to it is the sexually evocative thing. So once you know the intent, it's just like, okay, if you go and like open up Anime Freaks disc and you're like looking at the character bios, they're literally 8 years old. That is their age. So it's not even like, oh, they're like 1,000-year-old demon, or this is that chibi like normal girl. They're literally like kids. And so it creates this very odd situation that you're kind of in. And even without knowing that, I think people just can notice, like, because it's so prevalent and so upfront. And I think it's one of the unfortunate things. We're talking about before in the Welcome to Pia Carrot episode where you're like, I feel like I painted a bad image of the system because of Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Yeah,
And honestly, we kind of talked about the nature of the sexual content in that game, and I think I over there I have very different feelings about it versus like Chip
yeah.
Chain
I,
Kick.
I feel better
But
about it now, personally. I think.
yeah, but I think Chip Chain Kick is one of the things that like it probably definitely did not help the image of the system in the West because it's like, oh, here's a game I can play. Oh, kind
Oh,
of thing,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
Um, and I think everyone's going to feel differently about it. I read some pretty interesting articles a while ago about like, um, I forget what it's called, Cagliostro, um,
yeah, yep.
and kind of a lot of the culture that came out of that and the Dojin scene and stuff like that. And it was
Mm,
interesting, but it is a very much this like looking into like the purpose of innocence in like sexual fantasy stuff. And it's one of those things that it's interesting to like see how the human brain works and like why that becomes that. But at the same time, it's like it doesn't change the fact that it's like, oh, this is like unpleasant in some ways, right? And it's kind of up to the individual person of like how much that's going to bother them. Because to me, again, I can kind of ignore it because I'm just like, this is a video game, so I'm just going to play it. But I can understand for other people looking at it and being like, I just don't even want to be associated with this kind of thing in any
yeah,
way possible. So
yeah.
Chip Chain
And
Kick, not worth it if that is like your hill to die on for sure. So
definitely, definitely. So something else that we learned in kind of researching this game, or really just like I said, translating, just machine translating the manual, is that there was a really cool promotion that was going on with this game and Blue Breaker.
mm.
So I got to learn a little bit more about this because in the packaging material for Chip Chon Kick, it specifically says, hey, you can get this promotion where you get two, unique sort of like special edition phone cards. And this is a like kind of a has been a collectibles thing. I think even maybe even up to these days. Maybe it's not phone cards so much. I think they maybe switched to like prepaid cards for shopping or something like that. But basically, you can get cards that have some sort of monetary value, and they feature some kind of like artwork from you know a show, a series, whatever, some sort of media that you enjoy. So. Um, I was able to find basically the registration card for that in Chipchon Kick, and it has a sticker on it. So what you actually had to do was buy Chipchon Kick, which, if I remember correctly, it came out within about 2 weeks of Blue Breaker. So you would have had to buy Chipchon Kick, and then buy Blue Breaker. Blue Breaker had another registration card where you took the sticker from Chipchon Kick, you stuck it on that, you put it in an envelope with a certain amount of postage, and you would get back the set of phone cards, which I think is pretty cool. You
Oh wait,
had
so you
to
needed both of them?
you needed both of them, yeah. So
Oh,
basically,
okay.
they would have been getting you to purchase two games for the PCFX, new at full price probably, and then you really only had about a month to get them in, because I think you had to get them in by the end of like October, something like that.
Mhm.
So you really had to hustle on that. So, I have those phone cards, and I have a lot more appreciation now for what somebody back then had to go through in order to get them. It's a pretty cool promote. I mean, it's obviously like a little manipulative, right? Like you had to buy
Oh yeah.
two games that probably cost $60 back in the '90s, but
It,
I thought that
it's
was a cool.
it's kind of interesting because in a lot of ways, I don't know how much we've really confirmed this, but it feels like Blue Breaker was supposed to be like a killer app for the system in some ways, right?
Yep.
It feels like it was supposed to be the big RPG.
It
Um,
was it was the soccer wars of the PCFX,
yeah, yeah.
supposed to be.
And so it's interesting to connect Chip Chan Kick to that. Um, because again, I don't know enough about the PC98 scene, like how big I don't know if we mentioned the developer's name, but Cybertech Custom, I think is what they're called, right? Um, like I don't know how like standout they were, but I guess at that point though, with how the release windows were on the system, there probably weren't too many other games that you could pair to go with that. It's kind of like you're going to get the choice between a few other games. I didn't pull up the release calendar, but like Hunex did release a lot of stuff, and so it makes sense to me if they put out games around the same time, doing something like that with both Hunex games. But
Hmm.
releasing two games at once from one developer is probably not ideal. So
Yeah.
it's an
Yep.
interesting combination that I would wonder if there were more options if they would have paired, or if it's just kind of like, this is what's available. Let's try this idea and get it. And like the cool thing is, I remember correctly, your packaging has the stickers still, so you still have the mail-in stickers. So
It does. Yep. Maybe we can show an image on the screen or something. But yeah, I felt a little bad because I'm like, oh, it's like I'm kind of cheating. Like I have my cake and I'm eating it too here as a collector. 30 years later. But
yeah, I feel like there are other games that I've seen that have that as well, where you have like little mail-in things. Because I at one point scanned a bunch of manuals, and I think Ojo Sama Sosomu
yeah.
has one as well, featuring
Okay.
the girl with the like Chinese dress and the longer hair, or the
Yeah.
like twin tail kind of hair. I
Yep.
believe it is like a little cutesy picture of her where it's like a little cutout thing where you cut out that and you're supposed to mail it off. I forget for what exactly. Two copies of Ojo-sama on one video call.
On one video.
Has that ever happened before? This might be a first.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see. So yeah, it is very similar to the Chip-Chon Kick and Blue Breaker thing. So I'm moving it too much. So you're collecting different Ojo Sama Sosamo merchandise and then putting it together in order to get additional like special items.
Oh.
So notice a double campaign present for all applicants. The like Ojo-sama Memories mini album. In addition, 200 people will be selected by lottery for a special telephone card giveaway. Okay, so it's how to apply. You collect the application tickets attached to the 5 campaign items of, Ojo-sama Sosamo, the CD album, the CD single, the game, comic, and the anime, video or laserdisc. And then you enclose a certain amount of money. I guess it's $10,
1,000 yen.
basically.
Yeah.
I mean, not $10, but 1,000 yen. Postage and handling, and then you send it in. So
Is that
application,
June?
yeah,
Of that
application
year?
deadline is late June of 1996.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I actually have the light novel, but I don't see that listed in here, so I'm going to guess there's no campaigns marked with that. I could go
Okay,
grab it,
okay.
but
I mean, I have the DVD, but it's the
same.
North American English release.
That was
So.
immediately what came to mind. I was like, oh wait, it's not going to be in there.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I really don't think I have any of the other things, but yeah, I mean that would be an interesting thing to like. I don't know. I mean, to collect, just to see what those
campaign marks. Yeah,
yeah.
So I think there are a lot of. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think there's just a lot of like fan club culture at that time. I know with like, Zoku Hatsu Monogatari.
Yeah, Zoku Hatsukoi Monogatari. Hatsukoi is like first love. So koi is love. Hatsu is like first. So Hatsukoi Monogatari is story. So.
That has like a fan club as well, which unfortunately something I didn't finish when I like disappeared 6 months ago was I was looking into the PCFX Anime Festival, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there. And unfortunately, the project kind of got bigger than I was willing to put time into at the time.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's one of those unfortunate things. Like I have a lot of cool stuff in there. I probably should just post individual parts of it at this point rather than sit there and try to build a whole narrative. But it would be cool to be like, here's the definitive post about this thing. But that a lot of like fan club stuff would come up in there, like with the Angelique stuff as well. So
okay, yeah, David actually showed off a disc that he got in the Discord that it said something on it. It was something like carnival or like caravan or something like that. And it seemed like it was like, I think Compo was looking into it a little bit. It seemed like it was a disc from a specific event. So I don't know if it was that or not.
It's interesting with Chip Chan because it is, I think you mentioned earlier that it is like the mascot character for this company. They made like one game, I think, that didn't have Chip Chan in it, or at least not that we know of.
Yeah, probably at least one. But.
And so I don't recall there being a lot of like Chip Chan merchandise. I do know the phone card exists, and I believe
That's a good
there's
point.
the game promotional. Like I think a lot of PCFX games had this little like printout sheet that they ended up getting for stores and things like that. I'm not sure where those came from, but I feel like
Yeah,
I'm not sure
they're
if
like
all of them had it, but
leaflets,
a lot of them
flyers
do.
for the games. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I've seen a lot of collections of those online and things like that. So, but yeah, the phone card's like one of the only things I can think of that I've seen outside of that, and then also much more modern. But I did bring this over here just in case the vinyl from was it very okay vinyls for Chip Chan as well, which I could
yeah,
be
yeah.
wrong. You can correct me. I think they may have done some work towards the butt thing you're talking about earlier, where they maybe even more covered it up here. I could be
And
wrong.
that could be. I mean, that's
It's
not the
still there.
cover image of the game. That
Yeah.
is different. But
Yeah. So, anyways, but yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, that's part of what I like about the PCFX is like all those little like fandom things. I think that's what's appealing about it. We are talking a little bit about AI before the podcast. You don't talk about AI in the PCFX podcast. But I think sometimes I get this feeling of like with the PCFX, like I feel the humanity in it all, if that makes sense.
mhm.
Where it feels like I feel like the kind of the love and passion behind games in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of it, we've talked about before being like very Vita-esque. It feels like because it was such a small audience and such a in some ways fan focused thing where they're like focusing on this like small group of people, like the relationship they had with them, which was to extract money from them, uh was a lot like interesting and cute. And like because it was like before the internet was like huge, like having little like campaign marks and stuff like that seemed kind of like a fun little bonus thing with it. So and then also the idea of having like a telephone card, although some of that stuff still exists, like I think like Hollow Live, which is like the VTuber agency, if you're familiar with that, of like Japanese streamers.
I watch a
I
bunch of English and Japanese Hollow.
they have like campaign cards at like round one, which is like a arcade in the US, and you can go and like get your campaign cards or whatever. So that stuff still exists today. I don't know why it feels so novel, other than maybe it's just old, so the like money making aspect of it's gone, where it's like this is like a cute little thing, but it's not actively trying to pull people's money away, so it's like doesn't feel as like, I don't know, malicious isn't the right word, but like you kind of get to enjoy it for what it is without the other part of it, if that makes sense. Enjoy it for that. So I think the phone cards and stuff are interesting, but
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's that nostalgia thing, right? Like when we look back, what was it more innocent times, or were we just more innocent? I don't know the answer to that question. But
yeah, there's a weird physicality to like mailing in the marks. I think is kind of cool as well, though. So
yeah,
like at one point when I was a little bit more ambitious about what I would do with the PCFX fan club, I had kind of thought about the idea of like having like a mark you could mail in or something that would be like mail it to me and I'd send you something back. I never like figured out what that looked like, but I was like, this is a cute idea. So
we could
like
turn this into like a real fan club where we're making a zine every every 3 months or something, and
I dreamed big. At one point I dreamed big. But yeah, there's some ideas I had that were kind of fun. And I think it's like a lot of that kind of stuff on the system is like kind of the appeal, for me at least. So
yeah,
we're kind of getting out of the realm of Chip Chan Kick at this
we
point.
are a little bit. Well,
But
bringing it back, what are your thoughts? I guess on Chip Cake.
oh man. I think the biggest thought I have from it is that like out of everything on the system, if you have somebody who like can get over the panty shots, I think it is probably the best two-player game on the PCFX.
Mm.
I think look, Zenki as a video game is fine. It's my feeling. I don't think it's the greatest game. I think it's like a fun beat 'em up, but like it doesn't feel like it has the depth of most beat 'em ups out there. I mean, we'll talk about that in the future.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I guess I would question if beat 'em ups tend to have much depth. I think they're a lot of them are pretty shallow experiences in general. But
we can talk about that in the future, maybe. But
okay,
I
when we
just don't
talk
think
about
Zenki's like a great
Zenki at some
feeling
point,
game to play at
yeah,
times. I think Zero Agar's better, probably. So maybe actually let me pull back on that as well. But I think Chip Chan Kick is like legitimately a good playing game at the end of the day. Like it feels good to play. And even though we kind of make some comparisons to like Bubble Bobble and things like that before, and I don't have the greatest knowledge of like single screen games, I do feel like it has its own personality in terms of the type of gameplay it is. And then and again, if you can look past like the panty shot stuff, it's got a really cute look to it. It's just fun to look at, and like it's got a ton of attention to detail to the background, and even the cutscenes are just like very lively and all that stuff, right? So I think like it is one of the most like accessible games on the system where you can just kind of like put it in front of somebody and just kind of like get a feel for it. I think the one thing that would have been nice is like the more focus on an FMV kind of thing,
Yeah,
but I don't know. Like it's one of those things we talked about this before, like PC 98. Like the sprite based cutscenes really look
hold
great
up
on
well.
modern displays,
Yeah,
where the FMV stuff does not look great. So in some ways, I think the only reason I say FMV is because I feel like that is kind of in my mind what's um, cool about the PCFX. I say one of the core identities of the PCFX, and just having like an opening cutscene FMV always kind of feels like I don't want to say cheap out, but it kind of feels like it's underutilizing that part of the system to some degree. But I don't know how you use the FMV and chip chan kick it away, other than maybe like some ridiculous backgrounds where like FMV's playing in the background while you're playing or something like that. I
yeah.
don't know.
Well, that's one thing I did notice. I mean, the rester interrupt effects were really cool, but like it, there wasn't there. I don't think there was any other animation in the backgrounds, which is maybe neither here nor there, but
Yeah.
that might have been a little bit of a missed opportunity.
The only thing I can think of is the water in the one of the is it the park? I don't remember what it is. There's water that runs and the sprites
Oh, okay.
move with the water basically.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's not a lot of animation in the background for sure. But I mean, I think all the characters animate really well. So I
yeah,
think all that attention to detail up front is really
yeah.
good. So
Especially like the bosses and stuff are all they're really cool.
the question I always want to ask is like, does this feel like something that could have played on a PC engine, or do you feel like it was too complex? Because I think it's just like it's using a lot of similar tech to the PC engine. Um, so I part of me wonders like if I'm sure it could be done. I just don't know like in your mind like how much do you feel like the PCFX hardware improves it? Maybe that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I feel like I mean at the very least, like I do feel like it's easy to forget when you go back to that like PC Engine or like the FMV and stuff on the Sega CD and like Mega Drive, Mega CD and stuff like that. It There were definitely hardware limitations. There were color palette limitations still, and that sort of thing. So you would not have had the full screen sprite cutscenes that you do on the PCFX.
Mm-hmm.
You could have you definitely did have sprite. Well, I take that back. Maybe I don't think that they would have been as full screen on the PCFX. A PCFX wizard might know more about it. I don't remember exactly like what the ease cutscenes from the CD game and stuff like that looked like. Maybe they were more like there was some stuff, but I feel like on the PCFX, it was definitely diminishing gains. I would say
Yeah.
something like Chip Chon Kick is not the kind of game where it's like you could have had something comparable on the PC engine. I feel like that just might not have had as nice FMV or as big cutscene sprites.
Yeah.
But it's not like a quantum leap over what you would have seen on that system.
My favorite like Japanese comment I saw. I know this is not the game we're talking about. I still love the was it the next gen pachinko balls? Like they're so
Yeah, the
smooth.
smoothness of the balls is yeah,
Like, oh man,
yeah,
the leap in tech, man. But
yeah.
yeah. So I think it's just a
Well,
question I always think of when it's like a game that's like a lot more sprite based.
mm,
Versus like, just kind of like welcome to Pia Kara. I don't think I would ask that question if that makes
yeah,
sense, just
yeah.
because of
I
how it's
mean,
presented. So
one thing that's easy to forget too is number of sprites was actually a pretty big deal. So
mm,
yeah, I don't know for sure. I would assume that the PC engine could probably have handled like the number of sprites on screen, but that is, there are big sprites and there are sometimes a lot of them
a
on
lot of
screen
them.
in Chip Tron Kick. So
The boss
um,
fights in particular, actually, because it's like two, like there's some of them where there's two large sprites, and then
yeah,
also they spawn enemies, and then also
and they're
you're on
shooting a bunch of
screen,
projectiles.
and food's dropping, and power ups are dropping, and
Yeah,
projectiles. Yeah, so maybe those scenes, like it's a lot more intense as well.
But yeah, I mean, my impressions. I mean, so for Chip Chon Kick, like there aren't a lot of games, even ones that only take an hour or two to get through, that I'm gonna willingly beat multiple times, right? Um, I think Chip Chon Kick is a game that I've learned to appreciate over time,
Mm,
and also just arcade style gaming too. I think is something that I've learned to appreciate more over time as well. I've gotten into shoot 'em ups like the Raiden series and things like that, and I play them on my CRT TVs. And I didn't just play Chip Chon Kick for this podcast episode that we're doing. Like I played it, probably a decade ago now, and beat the game just for my own enjoyment. And it's not something that I come back to and score chase on a lot. But if I want to throw a game in my PCFX and play something fun, like Chip Chon Kick is not off the table for that. Like that's definitely something that I can
yeah.
throw in the PCFX and play. And I think like that definitely is a testament to the quality of the game. I feel like, and its staying power and its viability to people in 2026 and beyond. I think, that they did a pretty impressive job of making a game back then that is still, just fun to play and a good way. Like it doesn't, doesn't overstay its welcome. And I feel like, Cannon Spike at a half hour is kind of nice because it's pretty quick, but it's almost a little too short, right? I think
Yeah.
Chip Chon Kick it's 60 levels because each board is 10. I don't know. Each level is 10 boards or whatever you want to call it, screens, and so you play through 60 screens that you're clearing, and it's always cute. It definitely has that cute 'em up aesthetic, which I think that might be another thing that makes games have some staying power because it's like, I don't want to say like you never want to go back and play like that, you know, Chunibyo dark depressing like, uh, sort of games, but I think those bright, cheerful, colorful, um, sometimes goofy games, they're just they're very accessible. I think it's a fun game to come back to.
How long are the Raiden games when you play those?
I know I've beaten them, but I don't
Yeah.
know that I have a really clear answer to that. It's probably around probably like an hour or something like that.
Okay.
I'd say you can go through them. 40 minutes maybe, some probably more in that range than like a half hour. But
Yeah, I feel like one thing I didn't consider until you mentioned the length of Cannon Spike was just like this game typically takes me about 2.5 hours,
mhm.
and that for a score chasing game feels kind of intense.
Mm.
That being said, I don't remember for sure. You can continue in this game. I don't know if
Y-
when you continue, if it carries your score over. Like if I like finish a stage, power the game off, I don't know if my score carries over because you can
mm.
select any stage after you beat the game. Because when I
I
click
believe
continue, I
so.
could go straight to stage 6.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think when you beat the game, you get their score again. But I don't know if it's like stage specific scores exist at all, really. Now that I think about it, so I don't know. The structure is kind of weird now that I think about it. Like 2.5 hours seems like a long time to do a score attack.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean,
or
and
2 hours.
I would have to assume that like that might have been. Well, I mean, one that might just be how something like Rainbow Islands is, or Bubble Bubble. I'm not sure exactly how
Yeah,
long it takes to beat those games, but it's also like a home console experience. I think even people expect to get their money's worth, so to speak, out of a game. So I mean, you didn't just go and like put $1 worth of quarters into an arcade
yeah,
machine. You spent $60 on a game you're going to come home and play. So I could see them wanting to at least have a little bit of runtime to it. But
yeah. It's an interesting push and pull I didn't think about before. So
mm,
I'd be curious. I will say, if anybody out there in the audience has played Chip Chan Kick as a score attack style game, if you're chasing the leaderboard, trying to get on the global rankings for Chip Chan Kick, uh, I'd be
send
curious
your
to
send your
know.
photograph into
Well,
NEC
yes, take your
Home
Polaroid
Entertainment.
camera out, take your picture, wave it in the air, mail it to me, and I don't know what will happen at that point. It just shows up at the door. Um, but yeah, if you do play a game like that, I'd be really curious to know, or if you just have score attack like if you're in Discord tech stuff and you like have played Chip Chan Kick and you're like, I don't play it because of this, I'd be really curious to know, because I just don't have the experience to really sit there and be like, this is what is good and bad about this experience in this way. Because I just kind of casually play through it. So
should we do that in the Discord? Have a score challenge for Chip Chan Kick. Everybody send in your screenshots by whatever July
that's a
or
cute
something.
idea. Honestly, it's a very cute idea. I like
Yeah,
that a lot.
Get people playing the PCFX. Let us know in the comments.
We'll see. I like with me being as like weirdly off as I am still. I don't know if I want to commit to anything, but I love the idea of that at the very least. So I wish, I don't know. I'm not going to think about this. I'm already thinking about this. I shouldn't think about this right now. Anyways, but yeah, I think it's a cool game. I think that's it. I don't know if there's much more to say. That's kind of one of the things. It's like, it is one of the games that I think is the, like, I had the least questions about on the PCFX, if that makes sense. So I think like coming into this episode, I'm just like, I guess I'll just talk about like how I felt about this game, but like I don't think there's like any big revelations I ever expected to get from playing Chip Chan Kick.
Yeah, so if you know zero Japanese, you can play Chip Chan Kick on the PCFX.
Yeah. I guess the developer's history is interesting because it is maybe the most like direct route to PC98 that is like a developer making a game for PCFX. And it's also interesting to see the difference because those games on PC98 are very erotic, where this is like the home console, like let's tone it down a little bit kind of thing, which,
and there are
with how people present the PCFX a lot of times, like is not a message consistent with that for that.
Well, the way people present the PCFX, you would think every game on the PCFX followed that trajectory, but so because there are some like direct lineage of what is it? Is it Classmate 2?
Yeah, I think those are ports though, right? I don't think those are original.
and Welcome to P-Carrot and stuff like that. But this was very specifically like actually toned, not that there's a version of Chip Chan Kick that isn't toned down, but I feel like the developer put on their kid gloves for for the PCFX.
So,
okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And you can always come and hang out with us on our Discord. And there's always a lot of cool discussion, and it's fun to hang out. If you want to give us some feedback about the podcast, or just see what people are talking about the PCFX, we'll have our links in the description. So anything else?
No, I think that's it for now.
So, all right, we'll catch everybody again next time. Take care.
All right, bye. See you next time.